This week we prepare to head into Easter. There's a thread running through Matthew 26, 135 that I didn't see until I'd spent a full week inside it. Let me share what I saw and hope you gain some insight and knowledge for your own journey. Every single person in this passage, the priests, Judas, the disciples at the table, Peter, every one of them has a version of Jesus in their head. And every single one of them is about to discover that version was wrong. The whole passage is about the gap between who you think Jesus is and who he actually is. And the terrifying thing is, the people closest to him are the ones most confused. That's what this week is actually about. Not just betrayal, not just the Passover meal, not just a woman with expensive perfume. It's about what happens when the person you've committed yourself to refuses to be what you needed him to be. And what you do in that moment says everything about you. Let me take you through the passage one more time. Not the whole thing, just the lines that hold the most weight. Matthew 26, 1-5. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they plotted to arrest Jesus in some sly way and kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. Verse 15. Judas asks, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" They counted out 30 silver coins, verse 22. At the table, after Jesus says one of them will betray him. They were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, "Surely not I, Lord." Every one of them, one after another. Verse 26. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." And then verse 33, Peter, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." 5 verses, 5 different people or groups, and every single one of them is holding a different version of Jesus, and every single one of them is wrong. So here's the pattern that only emerges after a full week inside this text. Watch how each actor in this scene relates to Jesus based on what they need him to be, and watch how that need sets them up for collapse. Start with the chief priests and the scribes. We spent time this week on why they needed to move quietly, why they couldn't just arrest him in the open. And the answer we landed on was fear. Not fear of Jesus exactly, fear of the crowd. The people loved him, or at least a lot of them did, so the priests are managing a political situation. They're thinking in terms of leverage and timing and optics. And to do that, they have to think of Jesus as a manageable problem. A disruptive teacher who's gotten too popular. Someone who can be neutralized if you move carefully enough. That's their version of Jesus. A threat, but a containable one. And catch this. That version requires Jesus to be the kind of man who can be outmaneuvered, who can be controlled by human strategy. The whole conspiracy only makes sense if you believe you're the most powerful force in the room. If you believed for 1 second that you were dealing with someone operating on a completely different level, you wouldn't be worried about riot control. You'd be on your knees. They're not on their knees. They're running a political calculation. And that calculation is built on a misread. Now move to the woman with the alabaster jar. We spent a day on her. Jesus says what she's done will be remembered wherever the gospel is preached, which is an extraordinary claim. He's essentially saying, this act is part of the story now. It's inseparable from what's about to happen. And the reason is almost certainly that she understood something the disciples didn't. She anointed him for burial. Whether she knew it consciously or not, she was doing the thing that people do for the dead. She was preparing him for something catastrophic. Her version of Jesus, she didn't seem to need him to be anything. She wasn't calculating, she wasn't managing, she was responding. Something in her read the room and broke the jar. That's actually the only response in this entire passage that's remotely calibrated to what's actually happening, and the disciples were furious. Why this waste? They had a use in mind for that money. The poor, they said, which sounds noble, but I think what's underneath it is this. They were still thinking in terms of a movement with a future. You budget for the future. You don't pour 300 denarii over someone's head if you think everything's about to end. Their version of Jesus still included a tomorrow, a strategy, something to manage and grow. She knew something they didn't, or felt something they couldn't afford to feel. Then there's Judas. And the question we lived in this week was, what makes a person do this? What makes you hand someone over after 3 years? And I keep coming back to the number. 30 silver coins, the price of a slave in the Exodus legislation, not a fortune, not enough to retire on. This isn't about greed in any simple sense. It's too small for that. Something else is driving this. What I think Judas had was a version of Jesus as a catalyst, someone whose arrest, whose confrontation with power would finally force the moment, force the kingdom into being. If Jesus wouldn't push things to the edge himself, then maybe the way to get there was to push him. And if that's right, Judas didn't think he was betraying Jesus. He thought he was helping him. He thought he understood the mission better than Jesus did. That's an almost unbearable thing to contemplate, that the betrayal comes not from someone who stopped believing, but from someone who believed so hard in his own version of what Jesus was supposed to do that he arranged events to make it happen. And that version of Jesus, the one who needed to be pushed, who needed human strategy to accomplish his work, that version was catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. Now the table. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because the pattern breaks open at the table and you start to see yourself in it. Is it I, Lord? One after another, every disciple, and we spend a day on what that question actually means. The Greek is medi ego eimi, Kyrie, and the meaty construction expects a negative answer. They're asking the question in the form that already assumes they couldn't possibly be the one. It's not me, right? And yet they're all asking it, which means some part of every single one of them suspects it might be. That's not comfort. That's not community. That's 12 people in a room who all have a private fear that they're the weakest link, and they're hiding it behind a question that sounds like confidence. Their version of Jesus is a teacher they're devoted to, and they mean it. The devotion is real. Peter's going to mean it when he says he'll die before he denies him. He's not lying. He's just catastrophically wrong about himself. His version of Peter, the loyal one, the rock, the one who won't break, is as much a misread as the priest's version of Jesus. And that's the pattern. The whole passage is a series of misreadings. Everyone in this story has a model of Jesus that works for them, that serves their need, that fits their existing framework. The priests need him to be containable. The disciples need him to be building something they can be part of. Judas needs him to be a catalyst for the plan. Peter needs him to be someone worth dying for, which is actually about Peter needing to be someone who'd die for him. And in the middle of all of this, Jesus takes a Passover meal, a ritual that every Jew in that room had performed every year since childhood, a meal about Egypt, about slavery and freedom, about blood on the doorpost and the angel passing over, about God seeing his people in their suffering and acting. And he says, "This meal is about me now. This is my body. This is my blood." The Haggadah, the story the family tells at Passover, the story about what God did. Jesus just inserted himself into it. He didn't replace it. He extended it. He said the thing this meal was always pointing toward is happening right now, in this room, with me. That's either the most audacious thing any human being has ever said at a dinner table, or it's true, and nobody at the table fully grasped it. They were still inside their own versions of the story. So here's what I want you to carry out of this week. The passage doesn't condemn the disciples for having a wrong version of Jesus. It doesn't mock them. It doesn't even correct them directly. Jesus just keeps moving. He breaks the bread. He pours the cup. He washes feet you didn't see in this passage, but that's coming. He serves people who are about to scatter. The question this passage puts in front of you isn't, which disciple are you? That's too easy. The question is, what version of Jesus have you constructed to fit your own needs? What do you need him to be? A motivational force, a cosmic validator, a political ally, a personal therapist, a guarantor of middle-class stability? Because the text is pretty clear that everyone who had Jesus pinned down, everyone who knew exactly what he was and what he was going to do, was wrong. The ones who got it right were apparently almost no one. The woman with the jar, maybe her. The one who didn't calculate. The one who just responded to what she saw and broke the most expensive thing she owned over him. That might be the closest thing this passage has to a compass point. Not a theology, not a doctrine, an impulse. See clearly. Respond. Don't manage. Don't strategize. Don't ask the question that's already loaded with the answer you want. Just see and respond to what you actually see. Next week, we're moving into Matthew 26 to 36 through 75, Gethsemane, the arrest, and Peter's denial. The disciples scattered, and we're going to ask what it actually looks like when your version of yourself falls apart. See you next Monday.